if you haven't gotten a chance to, should be right up front. That way you can follow along, though the text will also be on the screen as well. So I'll turn things over. Yael, Kanarak, without further ado, we can turn our attention to the screen.
Thank you, thank you. I hope you all had a great schmoozing and getting to know each other. So what we're going to do, make sure you have your packets. That's what we're going to study from. And we're going to look at a few segments from the creation stories, and then a few segments from the stories of Moshe in relationship and her relationship with Tehovah. Okay. Before that, I want to show you one thing in case you want to follow us in the future. This is our website and has a lot of content in here. So this is what it looks like, and you have the URL at the top of the packet. Now at Torata, before we study, we say a little prayer that we wrote for the study itself, and I will read that to you as the beginning of our study. Yehi Ratzon, uncover my eyes and let me see wonders in your Torata. May this time of study be a time of compassion and goodwill within me, that my partners in study will see me and I will see them as friends, beloved, deserving to be heard and attuned to listening, nurturing others and growing themselves, and together we'll be worthy of facing one another as all as one, facing Torata, face to face, as a woman speaks to her fellow woman. May we take hold of Torata with speech and silence, with the heart's insight in all its completeness, with reverence, with joy, with humility, with patience, with modesty and forgiveness for slights. And we will distance ourselves from vanity, judge our colleagues with generosity, stand up for truth, stand up for peace, and study in order that we can act. So go to the top of your pages. And here we have the first verses from Genesis in Torata. I will read in Hebrew and then in English. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Ve'haaretz haya teho uvahu. Ve'choshech al pnei tehom. Ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. In the beginning, Elohim created the skies and the earth. And the earth was teho uvahu, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim hovered over the face of the waters. In the first two verses of Genesis, we meet the first name of the divine, Elohim. In Torah, it's Elohim, which means gods in plural. In Torata, we have a new name for the goddess, and it's Elohim with an N sound at the end. And we understand the word Elohim, and this is inspired by a Kabbalist interpretation of the name, as a compound word that means Eluhen, these are. And now these are is looking at everything that is first feminine in the creation. This is a power that it's a power that splits. Our ability to say and look at something and point and say these are means that we are separate from it. We're recognizing an inner distance from it. And this is the first power that comes to play, power of Elohim. The other reading into this name is that it has within it the word ani, I, and the word en, nothing. And we can understand this idea of Elohim as a relationship between the self and the void that carries through the narrative. The next verse, we have something interesting happening here. And the earth was teho uvahu. Traditionally, in Torah, the words tohu vavohu are translated as void and chaos. In Torata, something interesting happened here. Now, I want to mention, as a backstory, that the Torah existed for many years without vowelization. And a language like Hebrew without vowelization allows for different kind of vowelization adaptation. In the 8th century, the Mesorah in Tiberias added the vowelization, and with it came a layer of interpretation. So in the process of revealing Torata to us, sometimes we reconsider the vowelization, and that's what we did with Teho Uvahu. Teho is the beginning for the name Tehovah. Tehovah, the name of God, the goddess that will appear only in the 2nd chapter. In this chapter of first creation, it's only Elohim, the power that splits and multiplies. So Teho starts or hints to the name Tehovah, the beginning of being. Then it goes into Tehom, the deep, Tehom, Tehovah, Tehom, and then it will emerge as Tehovah in the next chapter. So it's going into the deep, adding the letter Mem at the end, which stands for water. And it's also a word that looks at each other. It's a mirror word. It has who and who looking at each other. And here again we hint at a certain kind of consciousness that's starting to emerge. Uvahu, he is inside her. That's what vahu means, huva'u. And again, hinting at a new kind of social order that is forming in Torata. Now, if you have questions that rise up, keep it. We're going to have an opportunity at the end for a Q&A. Let's go to the next text. This is again from Genesis. And here we can read about the creation of Chovah. ותאמר אלוהים נעשה חובה בצלמנו כדמותנו. ותברא אלוהים את החובה בצלמה, בצלם אלוהים בראה אותה, זוכרה ונקב בראה אותן. And Elohim said, let us make a chovah in our image, after our likeness. Let's stay here for a little bit. The name that we know. So, in most cases in Torata, we regendered the names, except for 2 stories where we swapped the roles. The story of creation, Adam and Chava swap roles. And the same goes for the scroll of Mordecai. What is the story? The book of Esther became the book of Mordecai. But these are an exception. But some interesting things happen here with this. So the name of Eve in Hebrew is Chava. This is a name that Adam gives her. And and Torah makes a commentary about the name, that she's the mother of all living. Except that the name Chava itself is unclear in terms of its meaning itself. When we changed the vowelization of the first letter, we went from Chava to Chova. Now we have an entity, a creature that can feel. Chova means to experience. She is experiencing. And what this suggests for us in this first creation, when Elohim creates the Chovah in our image after our likeness, it suggests that the first creation is an entity that can feel. The place that we connect and we are in this state of image after likeness is a place of feeling. Then in the next verse, ותברא אלוהים את החובה בצלמה, בצלם אלוהים בראה אותה, זוכרה ונקב בראה אותן, and Elohim created the Chovah in her own image. In the image of Elohim, she created her. Zochra and Nekev, she created them. I want to say something about the little ve and e in front of chova. This is how it appears in the text. It's the Adam, the Adam. It's not a person yet. It's not a name of a person. It's a description of an entity that has a certain kind of quality. And in Torata, it has the quality of feeling. Now, what happens with these strange words, Zohra and Nekev? In Torato, it says he created them male and female. The words in Hebrew for male and female are Zachar and Nekeva. Zachar has its origin in Akkadian, and it meant penis. Nekeva means the one with the hole. But over the years, that original meaning of Zachar gave way to the meaning that the word, the letters Zayin, Kaf, Reish also means to remember. So in Torato, the male keeps the memory and the female is the whole. And we thought it would be really interesting to reverse that. So we actually came up with a new word. Zohra is a new word. It's not a word that exists or is an official word in the Hebrew dictionary. Zohra, the capacity to remember. And Nekev, whole. Now it's in the male form. But it refers to the input-output, the senses, our ability to experience through the senses. So now the first creation is not so much a human or two people, but it's an entity, a capacity within us to feel, and that capacity has an input-output system, a sensical system, and the capacity to remember. So we have a new way of looking at this first creation. Okay, here we are. Now we're at Genesis 2, 3 verses. I'll read the Hebrew. ותפל תאווה אלוהים תרדמה על החובה, ותישן, ותיקח אחת מצלותיה, ותסגור בשר תחתנה. ותיבן תאווה אלוהים את הצלע אשר לקחה מן החובה לאיש, ותביאהו אל החובה. ותאמר החובה, זה הפועם, עצם מעצמי ובשר מבשרי, לזה יקרא איש, כי מאישה לוקח זה. I'll read the Torah side and then the Torata side. And Lord God dropped asleep upon the Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and close flesh instead of it. And Lord God built from the rib he had taken from the Adam a woman, and brought her to the Adam. And the Adam said, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This will be called woman because of a man she was taken. And this is what happens in Torata. And Tehovah Elohim dropped asleep upon the Chovah, and she slept. And she took one of her sides and closed flesh instead of it. And Tehovah Elohim built from the side she had taken from the Chovah a man, and brought him to the Chovah. And the Chovah said, this who pulses is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This will be called man because of a woman he was taken. I'm going to read that last part again. And the Chovah said, this who pulses is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This will be called man because of a woman he was taken. Okay, so let's parse a little bit what is happening here. So we have this entity that feels, HaChovah. And how did we get from this one at last to this who pulses? The word Pa'am in Torato means at last. This incident. But if we change the vowelization from Pa'am lepoem, we get the beat. We get the heartbeat. We get a step also. It also means step. It also means heart beat. Pe'ima. So what this suggests, and this is available only in Torata, and that's where Torata, it reveals new ideas, is that now the Chovah, before she even sees the man, she can feel him. She can feel his heartbeat. There's another dimension to this kind of relationship that forms between Chovah and her man. Okay, we're entering now a few stories about Moshe. So the name Moshe means he lifts out of the water. That's what it means. So Moshe is the female form, she lifts out of the water. And the name really holds within it the kind of work that Moshe ends up doing. She's the adapter. She's the one who shapes the goddess and shapes the people, and shapes the goddess and shapes the people, and negotiates between them so they can understand each other. She's that person in that place. And we start with the story of Moshe. Now, this is a story about men caring for a baby girl. So let's start to read that. And the woman of the house of Leviah went, and she took for a man the son of Leviah. And the woman conceived and bore a daughter. And when he saw that the girl was good, he hid her for 3 moons. And when he could no longer hide her, he made for her a wicker ark and caulked it with resin and pitch. And he put the girl inside and laid it among the reeds by the bank of the Teor. And her brothers stood guard at a distance to see what would befall her. And the son of Parah came down to bathe in the Teor, and his lads walking along the Teor. And he saw the ark among the reeds, and sent his servants to fetch it. And he opened it, and saw her, the girl, and here a maiden crying. And he felt compassion towards her, and said, "This one is one of the Hebrew girls." Then her brother said to the son of Parah, "Shall I go and get you a man nurse from the Hebrews to nurse the girl for you?" And the son of Parah said to him, "Go." And the lad went and called the girl's father. And the son of Parah said to him, "Take this girl and nurse her for me, and I will give you your wages." And the man took the girl and nursed her. And the girl grew, and he brought her to the son of Parah, and she became his daughter. And he named the girl Moshe, and said, "Because I drew her out of the water." What does it feel like when it's the men who are taking care of the baby girl who's destined to be a great woman? I want to make a few, keep your thoughts with you. We're going to open it up in Chavruta, and then we'll open up in questions. I just want to make one remark in usually the translation. Okay, so the name of the river that is usually translated into the Nile River, or Sea of Reed sometimes, is in Hebrew Yael. We came up with the name Teor. Ye is future tense, and Or means light. So the name of the river can be the future light. And now it's in the female form. So imagine a baby girl in a wicker basket sent on the future light. This is potential in the making. It's potential that then will, take many, many years to really come to its fruition, and we'll meet that moment where that light comes from her. But at this moment, Moshe is a potential. And for that potential to go through the first phases of her life, she needs to be cared for by her brother, her father, and the son of Parah. Think about these men, you and us and the men in our lives who are caring in that way. This is what Torata, this is the gift that Torata offers the mensches in our midst. So, all right. Okay. I want to say one thing about men nurse. So this is really interesting. In Torata, the physical birthing process remains with the women, but the men are the one who benefit, uh, who are, how would we say that, defined by it. That's how it is. But for example, in English translation, usually when we have successions of names, they use the word begot. But in Hebrew, they use the verb yalad, which is the same verb that we use for a woman giving birth. It's the same verb used also for men giving birth. That's in Torah. The same verb is used. So what we wanted to maintain here is this kind of care. And what we suggest that a man nurse, ish menek, is not necessarily a man feeding a child from his own breast, but is a man who's feeding a child in general, taking care of the baby's well-being and feeding. So we are expanding the meaning of the name in the same way that the verb yalad, gave birth, is used interchangeably for women and men in Torah. We use menek here also in that sense. We're moving along now, and now we're in Exodus 33. And this is, I remember the first time when I regendered this, I was so astonished by this kind of expression of intimacy between Tehovah and Moshe. It's Tehovah who's coming to Moshe and speaks to her face to face. And in Hebrew, it's panim el panim, which can also be read as pnim el pnim, inside to inside. Let's sit with that for a little bit, with this sentence. What do we know about, and now I'm going to speak to the women in the group. What do you know about the intimacy of a woman speaking to her girlfriend? And in that respect, I also would like to speak to the men in the group. Torata speaks to that kind of intimacy. What does that mean? What is that? How do you recognize this kind of intimacy? I'll read it in Hebrew. V'dibra Tehovah el Moshe panim el panim kasher tedaber isha el reuta. And Tehovah spoke to Moshe face to face as a woman speaks to her woman friend. It's a little difficult to translate the word reuta to woman friend or girlfriend. The words in English kind of, I lose them a little bit. They don't hold the same kind of tightness that reuta has. But think about an intimate friendship. This is what is conveyed here. And then the other thing that is really interesting is that who is the storyteller? Who is that storyteller that is there standing with Tehovah and Moshe so close that that storyteller can tell us, is a witness that tells us that the conversation is face to face. There are three people here, Tehovah, Moshe, and the storyteller. And one of the things that became really also very vibrant is, who is that storyteller? Who is that who's speaking? Who knows? Who's in the know here? What is that intimacy about? And here we arrive at Moshe on the mountain. I have two slides for you that I thought are absolutely extraordinary. And I'll read that. Exodus 34. And Tehovah said to Moshe, sculpt for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first. And I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Just listen to the sculpt yourself. Tehovah is telling Moshe to sculpt from stone. This is a highly practiced skill of a sculptor. To know how to take a shape out of a rock is a skill. And it says here that then Tehovah will write on the stones, which is interesting. And then it continues. And she sculpted 2 tablets of stone like the first. And Moshe rose up early in the morning and went up to Mount Sinai as Tehovah directed her, and took in her hand 2 tablets of stone. And Tehovah descended in the cloud and stood steady with her there, and called the name Tehovah. And Tehovah passed over her face, and she called, Tehovah, Tehovah, merciful and gracious, patient and abundant in goodness and truth. So I wanted to draw attention, and it's something that goes back to what I mentioned before about that connection between faith, amen, emunah, omanut. Faith, art, belief, craft all come into this. And it's the first time when I read this that I recognize the artistic qualities and capabilities of Moshe. Moshe is an artist as well. Many other things, but she's also an artist, and she's also a writer. And it brings up to the surface that deep connection between art and faith. So here we are at Exodus 34. ותהי שם עם תאובה 40 יום ו40 לילה, לחם לא אכלה ומים לא שתתה, ותכתוב על הלוחות את דברי הברית 10 הדברים. ויהי ברדת משה מהר סיני, ושני לוחות העדות ביד משה ברידתה מן ההר, ומשה לא ידעה כי קרן אור פניה בדברה איתה. ותער אהרונה וכל בנות ישראל את משה, והנה קרן אור פניה, ותראנה מגשת אליה. And she was there with Tehovah 40 days and 40 nights. She neither ate bread nor drank water, and she wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. And it came to pass, when Moshe came down from the Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the commandments in her hands, when she came down from the mountain, Moshe knew not that the skin of her face was radiant while she talked with her. And when Aarona and all the daughters of Israel saw Moshe, that the skin of her face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near her. So it turns out at the end that it wasn't Tehovah who wrote on the tablets, it was Moshe who wrote on the tablets. And she wrote on the tablets for 40 days and 40 nights. Again, this is a highly skilled, this is a trained person. It's hard to write for 40 days and 40 nights. And then this is where the light that was in potential in the moment where we sent Moshe on the Teor in the future light, now this is the light that is coming out of her. The skin of her face was radiant. And I want to close this part of the study here and invite you to do a little chevruta. At the end of your packets, I included several guiding questions to start a conversation. Think about what resonated with you, what triggered you, what made you comfortable or uncomfortable. Turn to the person next to you and have a discussion about that for, let's say, about 10 minutes, or maybe less. What do you think, Rabbi Mark? 5 minutes is good, or?
I think, you have another 30 minutes.
Perfect. So let's do
10 minutes
10
is
minutes.
perfect.
Take your time with the text. See, just review what comes up to you, for you, and then we'll open it up to questions.
And for the 17 participants that we have online, I'm going to put you in a series of breakout groups so that you can participate as well.
Great.
The packet, I think, is already in the chat for you. That way you can talk about it together. That's correct, Matt?
No, I don't think so, but I can put it there, I think.
Thank you. So once
Like,
it ends up,
give me a second.
perfect.
I'm
So
not
talk
entirely
amongst
sure.
yourselves, everyone.
How many rooms do you want me to create?
I'll do it. You just put it in the chat.
Okay.
For those who are virtual, I'm actually just going to put you in the room because it looks like it's not up yet. So just reflect on how this session was for you.
I don't have a link for it. I only have a PDF and an unshareable Google Doc.
It's okay. I just put everybody in rooms. So
Okay.
they'll just talk among themselves about how this was for them.
Okay, works out.
I can put the PDF on the drive if that helps.
It won't. It's not gonna. It's the reason why it won't work is not because you couldn't do that. It's because you would have to share it with every single person who's in the meeting, and you don't. I don't think you have all of their emails.
Oh.
Okay.
Sure. Whatever,
No, I was asking you if you were okay. Like, could you just cough?
Oh, well, COVID, leftover COVID.
Sorry.
Try to mute, but
You don't need to mute. It's totally fine. Yep, that'll work.
great. Eva?
Did you do something?
So 1 minute warning, everyone. Yael, you want to ask you want questions after this?
Yes, that would be great.
Cool. I'll pass the microphone around.
Great. And maybe
And
we
I'll
can take a few questions from online from the chat if we have them.
Perfect. I'll facilitate the questions.
Great, thank you so much. Love hearing it in the background, the people talking.
All right. So hopefully this was a productive conversation. And I think actually, Yael and I spoke about the fact that we were going to take some questions from everybody, but actually you just talked for a good 10, 15 minutes together. So maybe we'll take just a few comments in terms of sharebacks, interesting observations that you had, and then we'll move into the question piece, asking Yael really whatever you want to know. So let's start, and you have to speak into the microphone, so I'll walk around with the microphone. That way those who are online and Yael can know what you're asking. So any interesting observations? And Yael, feel free to respond as people speak.
Mm-hmm.
The very first verse that you shared with us, and it has to do with now with Elohim created the skies and the earth. And I thought instead of created, it would be more like birthed. And that maybe if it's nalda, I don't know what the right word would be. But like that would be the feminine action. And it's really of her, not separate from her. That creation seems like it's creation of something else versus birthing, which is from her.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Others?
So I think when we were grappling with the stories, what came out was there was a lot of kind of projecting where we think we would be if we really took the time. But so far we haven't taken the time. So I'm hoping there's a way that we can find a way to not spend 10 minutes at this, but spend like 10 hours so that when we're talking about it, we've really been in the material for a while and it's not our guess as to where we're going to end up.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have once a week a study of Genesis that we study chapter by chapter. Everyone is welcomed, of course. And I'm, happy to come again and do a more, in-depth study if there's a need for that. Absolutely. Yeah. It
Other
takes a
observations?
while. It's a new language in many ways. And it takes a while for it to settle. Mm-hmm.
Other observations from your partner study?
Thank you so much. I have a lot of observations, but I'll just share one, which is that much of what you shared with us in terms of commentary are things that were already in the text, that were already in Torata, but not seen until it was regendered. So the idea of speaking to a friend face to face, I could imagine men speaking to each other in a very intimate way, but it hits you in a different way to imagine as a woman speaking to a female friend. Or the idea of Moshe sculpting, that's in the text already, And I don't know that I've ever noticed it as an artistic endeavor. So I really appreciate that revealing what was already there.
Yes, this is something that we come across all the time, that it's not only that the emphasis has changed in terms of the gender, but what it allows, it creates a new filter for the text and the texture of the text in general. So suddenly things we haven't noticed suddenly come to the surface. Yes, absolutely. But then what it does is, and this is where the reciprocal relationship between Torata and Torato is starting to emerge, is that Torata reveals something about Torato, and Torato is birthing Torata, basically. So it's a really interesting relationship in that respect. And it's Torato who is raising Torata too. So we have this kind of, a birthing from Torato to Torata. At the same time, Torata is starting to, as it starts to grow in us and form new language and form new thoughts, it starts to project on Torato again. And we get this multispectral experience. Yes, thank you.
So we'll take one more comment about the text, and then we'll move into asking questions.
Well, we got going that in a way, when you flip it, we still have our underlying sexist view, so that if it's meant to be a female God as the creator, is that meant now to be a nurturing God as opposed to an all-powerful God? Because we tend to think of women in a certain way. And if we flip it, does that just completely, as our sexist underlying thoughts, at least at my age, just still apply, only it's just flipped? And so that was where we were kind of going.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. The power structure in Torata is the same as in Torato. We're not used to, for women to read themselves in seat of power. It's uncomfortable at first. We're not used to it. We immediately want to run away from that and kind of even the plane. That's a really common sort of immediate response. But one of the questions, so I work with the Tamar very closely. We work on the text again and again and again and again. And Tamar's constant complaint is, this is not a feminist book, which I agree with her. It doesn't fit into our feminist ideas. And it actually even challenges to a great degree how we think as feminists about women and men, or in general, feminist or not. And it opens up other ways of thinking about women and men that are not often necessarily or comfortable or familiar. But we found that this expansion opens doors to thoughts that otherwise were not available, and a much wider definition of what woman is, because now we have characters that have full gamut of color, from the terrible to the wonderful. And we can get out of a somewhat narrow, at least it feels to me narrow, definition of what woman is as nurturing, all these kind of qualities that we associate with motherhood primarily. But we know that, mothers have many colors, they're not all nurturing always. We start to get comfortable with this complexity. That's what Torata as a training allows us to get to. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but we are, as a people, value that wrestling with Goddess. This is what makes that possible. And we do that usually in a study in two or in a group, because we need to wrestle that together. And from there, that's where the new ideas come up. So yes, Torata is not a feminist book. So when Tamar complains to me, gets really angry and I understand her, I say to her, Tamar, so write a new book. But where to start from? Where do we start from? Where we have a huge canon, we have a huge library of the Jewish bookshelf, 80,000 books, I think. So few of them are written by women, and none canonized or written from the perspective of women. So where to start from? This is the language that we have right now. So I tend to say that Torata is 1.0. It's the first step out of that cage of story that defines women by their ability to give birth to boys. We get out of that first, as much as it can be awkward and uncomfortable. We get comfortable there, and hopefully there we can open the door to the library that is missing. That's the big vision. So yes, the training is uncomfortable and it's awkward and it doesn't sit well always, but that's where the invention comes in. That's where the creativity comes in. I want to mention something about the word create versus birth. So it's really interesting in the first, I think it's the second part where the Tehovah creates the Chovah, but she builds the man. And there's something about the way the divine power expresses the verb into the addressee of the verb, and that becomes a quality within that creature. So Chovah has the capacity to create life, and the man has the ability to build. That's as a primary or sort of a certain quality, and that's a reading that can, come into Torata. I don't want you to think dogmatically in any case. I want you to think of it as a steering of our habitual thinking, about a steering of our biases, and opening that fabric into new possibilities. Theology is a sculpture, is a mental sculpture. Our ideas, our picture of the world is a mental picture that is created. It's using the same kind of creative tools, but it's sculpting our inner world. This is not set in stone. That part in ourselves is dynamic, and Torata allows us to see how dynamic it is. It really unsettles that. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, so I guess this follows up a little bit on that. I'm finding it really, really interesting to delve into the change in sort of the people, the gender of the people, those and the entities. What I'm having difficulty with, though, is grappling with the gendering of God, and I think that's because I have difficulty with the notion of gendering God, that that God would be viewed in some kind of binary way, so that. To me, then, in some ways, this is sort of where I've always tried to resist thinking of God as some guy. I don't want to think of God as some girl either, or some gal, some woman either. So can this be regendered and not have God be so binary? That's because that's I'm finding that to be really difficult.
So yeah, thank you for that. In the Hebrew is completely gendered. The God is always male in the Hebrew. And since the mechanics Torata comes from inside the mechanics of the language, not so much a liturgy, really in the books themselves. The project is to create, to expand the canon. Liturgy has been developing especially in the last 70 years, in many different ways, and creating new forms and new feelings about what this divine looks like. What I think is that unless we build the feminine language to live in us really clearly, it's really hard to be neutral. Let me say that again. Unless we build the language inside of us and we can identify very easily and naturally with the feminine, to do something that is neutral basically most often extends the male side, because the female side is so hidden. So that is the reason that it seems that it's very valuable to bring it up that way. That said, the question of gender fluidity always comes up and is always relevant. And I did a little experiment in English, which I'll share with you on the screen in a second, where I removed the gender completely from the story. And the way I did that is I retranslated in English from he or she to they. I'm going to bring it up right now so you can see that. It's the story of the binding of the child. And we'll read it, and you tell me what that feels like to you. I think it's this window. Yes. Okay. Okay, it's Genesis 22, 6-13. Gender neutral in English. Not possible to do in Hebrew effectively. So what I did here is Avraham, Emrama, high parent, became high parent, and the child Isaac, Titzchak or Yitzchak became they will laugh. Okay, I just really translate that into the meaning. The name for Elohim became these are, Eluhem, these are, that ability, that quality that splits things. And Tehovah I translated as future present, the future present moment, the next present moment. This is how this goes. And high parent took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on they will laugh, their child. And they took the fire and the knife in their hand, and the two of them went together. And they will laugh spoke to high parent, their parent, and said, my parent. And they said, here I am, my child. And they said, here are the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb of the burnt offering? And the high parent said, these are, will show the lamb of the burnt offering themselves, my child. So the two of them went together. And they came to a place of which these are had told them. And the high parent built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound they will laugh their child and laid them on the altar upon the wood. And high parents stretched out their hand and took the knife to slay their child. And the angel of future present called unto them out of the skies and said, high parent, high parent. And they said, here I am. And they said, do not lay your hand upon the child. Do not do anything to them. For now I know that you are, and these are fearing. And you have not withheld your child, your only child, from me. And the high parent lifted up their eyes and looked and saw another bovine behind them, caught in the thickets by its horns. And the high parent went and took the bovine and offered it up for the burnt offering instead of their child. So this is what it sounds like when the gender is removed completely. And I'm curious how that feels and how that reads to you. One of the things that it did for me, surprisingly, that it actually made me really differentiate between when does the word Elohim appear and when is the name for God Tehovah appears, and what is their different functions. So that's the thing that for me really lifted up in relation to that. So if we translate Elohim and Tehovah in this way to these are in future present, then we move them completely out of the human realm into the action of how life becomes and the next reality, the next present. This is the relationship, our relationship with reality.
So we have time for one more question.
I'm curious if you've had the chance to present, this kind of teaching to congregations or groups that are maybe, a little more traditional in their beliefs and maybe less more resistant to hearing this, and what kind of reaction you've had.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we did actually a session of about Mordecai's, the book of Mordecai, with students of Maharat. It's an Orthodox yeshiva for women. And it was incredible. They know the text so well, and they know it in Hebrew so well. So it was very lively and potent. In Hebrew, because everything is gendered, you feel the change in a much more extreme way than in English. For good and for bad. These are, different qualities. What we try to do when bringing it into the English is to bring back the resolution, because there's a tendency to remove that gender resolution for understandable reasons. But in our translation of the regendering, we actually increase the resolution of the gender, so we can really, really feel that. My philosophy has been this. Torata is not for everyone. It's for those who are ready for it. So I personally refrain from introducing it to people unless I feel that they will be open to it. Because this could be very unsettling for people that for them Torah is something that came from the sky, from Elohim, direct word of God. And it has a different shape and has a different form. And I think there needs to be a certain readiness to be able to consider something like Torata. And I respect that. So that has been my position. So the people who come and the people who come into the conversation are people who have some kind of readiness already, or the congregation already has some kind of opening or a question at least about this. So far, I've received 2 nasty emails from, I think, Orthodox men who hid behind, a fake email. But for the most part, it's been incredibly, especially the Jewish progressive American world has been very welcoming and has been supporting this initiative, actually supporting us to make this happen. So we can put the time to keep doing this. I hope this answers. I'm sure when we just built the Hebrew website, I don't know if you're aware that Israelis tend to be much more direct and aggressive, could be, and there's a lot of aggression on talkbacks. But so far, it's very small. It's within a group of people that are somewhat open to that. But we'll see. I'm assuming that it's a question of tipping point. The more Torata is out there, the greater chances that we're going to get a backlash. But that means that we reached, perhaps a critical mass. I don't know. But,
Thank you.
none besides her. So she runs the show, and we're here to serve.
Hopefully you hear the applause that's happening in the room.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to get a chance to experience Torata one more time because we're going to be reading the 10 Commandments, both in Torato and Torata tonight. And so you'll get a chance, if you're in person, to see Yael one more time on the screen. And those who are joining us virtually, we're going to take a break. Our learning sessions are only going to be in person, but feel free to log on for 12:30 again if you want to join us. I want to say a word about our learning sessions. So we've got a 10:30 learning session and an 11:30 learning session. And I want to just point out where everything is so you know. For those who are teaching, make sure that you finish on time so that the next teacher can come in. Each learning session should be between 50 and 55 minutes. That way the next one can start on time. And we'll meet back here at 12:30 a.m. if you're able to. So at 10:30, we've got Sinai and the Sabbatical Year with Rabbi David Greenstein. That's going to be in the chapel right back over there. Jewish paper cutting with our clergy associate Ronnie Pressman here at Temple Ner Tamid. That's in the meeting room. It's the room right before the chapel. Passionate Pacifist with Rabbi Elliot Tepperman is going to be in the rear hall. There's a kind of fake folding door back there. If you take the hallway by the bathroom around, you'll see that there's a room with a light on and a table ready for you. And Judaism and Reproductive Rights with Rabbi Sharon Litwin right here. The 11:30 sessions are as follows. Does God Speak to Us with Rabbi Lawrence Groffman is in the chapel, again, right this way. The Singing the Divine is going to be with Rabbi Arian Weitzman and Cantor Meredith Greenberg right here in the sanctuary. And I'll be in the back. Is there always a right answer? Again, in that rear hall, through the bathroom or through the kitchen where Elliot is going to be very shortly. So with all that, happy learning and see you at 12:30.